The letter arrived on a Tuesday, its edges worn, as if it had been clutched too tightly before being slipped into my mailbox. It wasn't the words "we need to talk" that froze my blood, but the way my parents' signatures trembled at the bottom, like they were afraid of what they'd written. I stood in my cramped apartment, the Seattle rain drumming against the window, and read the news that would unravel everything I thought I knew about family, fairness, and forgiveness. They were giving my inheritance to me half of Grandpa's estate, the money I'd counted on to start my own Lafito bailout my brother, Ethan, whose gambling debts had spiraled into a six-figure nightmare. I sank onto the couch, the letter crumpling in my fist. Ethan, my charming, reckless older brother, had always been the sun in our family's orbit, his mistakes forgiven before they were even made. Growing up, I'd watched him charm his way out of detentions, failed classes, and broken promises, while I, Claire the quiet one, worked 2 jobs through college and saved every penny. Grandpa's will had been clear. The estate, built from his years running a small hardware store, was to be split evenly between us, $50,000 each. For me, it was a chance to open a bookstore, my dream since I was 10, curling up in Grandpa's shop with dog-eared novels. For Ethan, it was apparently just another chip to toss on the table. I called Mom that night, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "Why my share?" I asked. She sighed, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "Ethan's in trouble, Claire. Real trouble. Loan sharks. Threats. We can't lose him." Dad chimed in, his tone gruff. "You're stable, Claire. You'll be fine. Ethan needs this more." The words stung like a slap. Stable. Responsible. Invisible. I hung up, my chest tight, and stared at the rain-slick city beyond my window. I could fight them, drag this into court, fracture what little family we had left. Or I could do something else, something better. The idea came at 3 a.m. when sleep refused to come. Ethan's debts weren't just numbers on a page. They were chains, and paying them off would only free him to forge new ones. What if, instead of sacrificing my future, we could build something that saved us all? I remembered Grandpa's store, its creaky floors and warm light, how it had been the heart of our small town before it closed. What if we brought it back not just as a business, but as a way to pull Ethan out of his spiral, to give him purpose, to make us whole again? By dawn I was scribbling plans, my anger replaced by a fragile, flickering hope. I drove to my parents' house the next weekend, a 4-hour trip through Washington's evergreen forests. The air was crisp, the kind of autumn day that made you believe in new beginnings. Mom and Dad sat across from me at the kitchen table, their faces etched with worry. Ethan was there too, slouched in a chair, his eyes avoiding mine. He looked thinner, his usual swagger dulled by shame. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I'm not giving up my inheritance," I said, my voice firm. Mom's eyes widened, but I held up a hand. "But I'm not letting Ethan drown either. I have a plan." I laid out my idea. We'd use the entire inheritance, both Sharesto reopen Grandpa's store. Not just a hardware shop, but a hybrid space. Part bookstore, part community hub with a small cafe. Ethan, who'd always been good with people when he wasn't chasing his next bet, could manage the cafe. I'd run the bookstore, curating titles and hosting events. Mom and Dad could help with the logistics, using their years of small business experience. The store would be a family project, a way to honor Grandpa's legacy while giving Ethan a stake in something real. "No more handouts," I said, looking at Ethan. "You work for this, same as me." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Mom's eyes glistened and Dad leaned back, rubbing his chin. "It's risky," he said. "The store failed once before." I nodded. It did. But Grandpa ran it alone in a different time. We're a team, and we know what people need now, a place to gather, to feel connected. I pulled out my notebook, showing them projections I'd worked out. Startup costs, potential revenue, community grants we could apply for. I'd spent days researching, calling old suppliers, even talking to a friend who ran a cafe in Portland. The numbers weren't a guarantee, but they were a start. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low. "Why would you do this, Claire? After everything?" I met his gaze, seeing the brother who'd once taught me to ride a bike, who'd snuck me cookies when Mom wasn't looking. "Because you're my family," I said. "And because I think you can be more than your mistakes." He looked away, but not before I saw the glint of tears. The next 6 months were a blur of work and worry. We pooled the inheritance, secured a small loan, and leased the old store, its windows still boarded up from years of neglect. Ethan threw himself into the project, surprising us all. He sourced local coffee, designed a cozy seating area, even painted the walls himself. I ordered books, set up shelves, and planned readings with local authors. Mom and Dad handled permits and budgets, their bickering a familiar soundtrack. There were fights over money, over priorities, over Ethan's late nights when we feared he'd slipped back into old habits. But he showed up every morning, paint-splattered and determined, and slowly trust grew. The grand opening came on a rainy spring day, the kind Grandpa would have loved. The store smelled of fresh coffee and new books, and the town turned out in droves, old friends, curious neighbors, even a few of Grandpa's former customers. Ethan worked the counter, his smile genuine, while I read a passage from my favorite novel to a small crowd. Mom and Dad beamed, their hands clasped tight. By the end of the day, we'd sold enough to cover a month's rent, and Ethan hadn't touched a card table in months. It wasn't perfect. The store barely broke even that first year, and Ethan had moments when his old demons whispered. But he went to meetings, leaned on us, and kept showing up. I didn't get my bookstore the way I dreamed, not exactly it was better because it was ours. The inheritance wasn't just money anymore. It was the weight of our choices, the proof that family could be rebuilt, not just broken. One night after closing, Ethan and I sat in the empty store, the rain pattering outside. He handed me a coffee, his hand steady. "I didn't deserve this," he said. I sipped, the warmth spreading through me. "None of us did," I replied. "But we made it anyway." Outside, the town glowed under streetlights, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged.